Now, you have many projects going on, and your latest one involves the U.S. crash retrieval program. Specifically, what is causing the crashes and who is collecting them?
The interesting thing about it is when you hear David Grush talking about the crash retrieval program in front of Congress with both public and private congressional hearings, it's not really in dispute anymore because it's not just David Grush, who still has his Pentagon security clearance. He still works there. He still works as liaison between Congress and Pentagon. But there's other whistleblowers that are coming out as well.
We might have just had confirmation that the Eglin Air Force Base UFO event was actually real, with many people, including Representative Matt Gaetz, speaking about this, coming forward and almost confirming that this event actually happened.
Received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America. And we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries. And I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico, and when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace, not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb, again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down, he said that his FLIR system malfunctioned, and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Well, I think this goes to that national security side, and you can go back through history of things showing up at certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when it tried to do it, and the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page. I would like to add, however, Congressman, there's a small bit of anger, I would say. I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people. And that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth.
And the problem is that they're all focusing on something that's very real, that there is a crash retrieval program. UFOs crash, and then the U.S. rushes out, collects the UFO. Some of them are not like crashed and broken. Some of them are intact, but they had to force land. And then they also capture the people that were inside them. So it's a whole, and what David Grush has been talking about, they call them non-human biologics, which is the craziest thing to call people. But nonetheless, and so what we did was we did a project just on, well, why are they crashing? It's like, because if you think about it, these people are able to create a spaceship that will fly across the galaxy to get to us. So you have to assume that they're technologically pretty good. And then you're saying, well, you mean as soon as they get here, their motor breaks and they crash? It's like, what? I mean, you know, you could go to your car dealer and get better service than that. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So we did a project on the cause and the people, the personnel in those crafts, and the cause. Why are they crashing? And we found out. We know exactly why they're crashing. And then we investigated what happened to the people, what happens to the ETs or the non-human biologics, although some of them look just like you and me. So they're not all, you know, weird-looking non-human biologics. They're just, but so the issue of the crash retrieval program is really not in dispute. There are congressional hearings on that, and they're not like one congressional hearing. They have repeated congressional hearings. And you also have pushback from the Pentagon that has been resisting this from the very beginning. And the Pentagon just recently issued a statement. We've done an analysis and we don't have any evidence of anything being extraterrestrial. So, I mean, so, you know, they're pushing back as much as they possibly can. They're trying to dismiss it. And the mainstream media is actually publishing that stuff. But on the same side, you get David Grush and other whistleblowers testifying in front of Congress. And like David Grush still has his security clearance and he still works there. And he's talking openly about the issue of trying to, of half of the Pentagon trying to shut this thing up and walk away from it. And the other half saying, you know, go ahead, testify in front of Congress, and giving him exact information. He can't say anything in front of Congress or in the press that's not pre-approved by his office in the Pentagon. So clearly the Pentagon is split. You have some people trying to hush everything up and the other side saying, no, you're approved to talk about this. So the stuff, the congressional testimony he's been giving has been approved by one section of the Pentagon. So that's sort of so it's not in dispute that these things are actually happening. The only issue is what they're not talking about is why they're crashing and who's on them. Who are these non-human biologics and what happens to them?
An SAS veteran has just come out to announce that he was part of a UFO crash retrieval program in the late 1980s, with him recovering with his team a downed non-human craft in northern England. And this supports recent US whistleblower claims of a secret UFO crash retrieval program. This is huge news, absolutely huge, with now, we've got no choice but to kind of really look at this, because obviously we've got David Grush saying, you know, 6 months ago, there's a crash retrieval program. The Pentagon then saying, no, there's not a crash retrieval program. And then there being evidence of crash retrieval programs, and now an SAS veteran literally coming out and speaking to the Daily Mail saying, look, back in the 1980s, me and the boys, we went and retrieved some downed aircraft of non-human origin. So this blows everything out of the water.
Finally, someone with a pair of balls has decided to come forwards on this issue. Right, so we've seen what's happened with the recent statement by the intelligence community and the DoD on releasing their first volume 1 of what they know about UFOs, and most people know it to be bogus and bollocks. It's a load of rubbish. They're lying, and basically don't bite down on that, because no one's biting down on it. A lot of people are coming forward saying this is nonsense, and all they're doing is rattling the cage further by enraging people that are wanting to come forward to disclose what's truly going on. However, we owe today's video to a Frank Milburn, who I believe was in the Special Forces unit back in the 1980s and 1990s, that has just divulged to Daily Mail that he was involved in a crash retrieval program that worked with JSOC and a bunch of other Tier 1 forces such as SEAL Team 6 and the CIA's equivalent of that for special operations, SAS and various other Tier 1 units across the world, in a crash retrieval program that involved securing a location of a crash craft in the north of England. So he's doing this because to support whistleblowers in the US. That's apparently his reason for doing so. And so, yeah, this is good. This is what we want. We want someone similar to David Grush disclosing information about what's going on in this area. They are not putting the toothpaste back in the bottle here. It's going to keep coming out. They've opened Pandora's box now. We're not going to let this slide, guys. We're not going to let this slide. This is the most up-to-date information from a new whistleblower. His name is Frank Milburn. Take a look on Daily Mail for more information on this. He is saying, I don't know if it was him or someone he knows of that was working SAS, that were tasked with securing a location of a down craft by the Royal Air Force, and they said to go and secure the location. They clearly said in this paragraph that they knew it was not human immediately. They knew instantaneously it wasn't human. They also knew that whoever was in there, they already fled the scene. So they had evidence that whatever was in there had fled the scene already. This is hot off the stove, guys. Take a look. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'll keep this short and sweet, but we've got to keep this narrative alive. And I honestly, we all have to share this information. We must keep everyone aware of what's going on this, because the US government is making a concerted effort to stop people finding out about this information. They do not want to divulge reality. They've been keeping this hidden, as I said to you before in other previous videos, for 7+ decades. They don't want this out the bag. It's too late. Everybody knows. Let's keep it alive.
I'm sure there are a lot of ufologists out there that say that we are shooting down the craft. And that makes me think kind of like what you said earlier, and that is, if they have the technology to get here, how are our armed forces able to shoot them down if they're so technologically superior to us?
See, that's an issue. There aren't a lot of ufologists out there that are making that claim. They're all really focusing on, does the crash retrieval program exist? And the next question they're asking is, does that mean we're not alone in the universe? Which is the stupidest question on the planet Earth. I mean, it's obviously we're not alone in the universe. The issue is, what's causing the crashes? So you actually answered the question. The spoiler alert is, yes, we are causing the crashes. But it's a complicated question. The U.S. military actually does have a secret space program, and that program's purpose, its main purpose, is to shoot down the UFOs, is to bring them down, and that's what's causing the crashes. But the backstory behind that is tremendously complicated, and it's hard to actually imagine how weird it really is. It's not just they're out there doing it. But first, let's cover the secret space program, because that's what's doing it. So you can sort of say, is there a secret space program? Now, if you accept the stuff that's coming out with congressional hearings, that there is a crash retrieval program, then I have to ask you, Jeff, okay, so if they have these UFO ships, and they've had them for apparently decades, many decades, what are they going to do with them? Now, if you're a general or an admiral, are you going to have the UFO put out there in the middle of the desert and then have your troops circle around it, sit on the ground, and put a campfire in the middle, and then sing Kumbaya year after year? No, that's not what they're going to do. They're going to say, if this is a ship, I want one. They're going to say, reverse engineer that we want the same thing. I mean, they're going to, admirals and generals are smart people, and they say, hey, this is tech. I want the tech. If we have an adversary that has the tech and we don't have the tech, that's a bad thing. we can get caught with our pants down. So if you have a ship, make one. And so out of all these decades, and think in terms of money, if you actually listen to the reports that are coming out of Congress with regard to military spending, it's not in dispute. Every single year, hundreds of millions of dollars go unaccounted for, meaning they don't know what they're spending it on. And this goes into the billions upon billions, even trillions, if you add up over the decades. And then you have to say, well, with all of this money, are you really saying that nobody at the Pentagon had enough money to hire an accountant? I mean, how can you lose that much money? I mean, it's so ludicrous. Obviously, they're spending it on something, and they're not saying what they're spending it on. Well, the secret space program is an obvious no-brainer. They have to have it because that's exactly what, as soon as they have a crashed UFO, they're going to want the ship. So they're going to have to spend money, and it's going to not be cheap. It's going to be a huge amount of money to build our version of those spaceships.
Flip.